Really? Okay. Well, shall we go to Arizona and meet some
Yeah, tell us about the
elders?
Hopi way.
Okay. Okay, when let's see, on our last journeys together, we were in Arizona. No, we were in Jamaica. And so when we were doing this book in Jamaica, we heard from several sources. We, of course, we were researching Bob Marley, and we heard from several sources that there was a tribe in the bottom of the Grand Canyon that had lived roots until the 1970s, that had kept all cultural influences at bay except a few Christian groups that came down there, that in the 1970s embraced Bob Marley's music as a cultural, a tribal drumbeat. So it's called the Havasupai, and they live on the bottom of the Grand Canyon. There's 800 of them. You're going to go by helicopter in a few minutes down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. And they were living their roots when this a couple of people, really one man, Supai Waters, who's in our Beauty Path book, heard Bob's music in Phoenix at an Indian school where he was going to school. And here's the book. So Julia and I figured on the 4th of July weekend we were going to drive. We had to speak at Sedona at a reggae festival, so we figured we'd do that. We'd meet my best friend Harley there, and we would hike into the bottom of the Grand Canyon. You can't get there by car. It's the only village in the continental U.S. you can't drive to. You can drive to the south remote rim of the canyon, and then you have three choices. You can walk for 6 hours, you can ride a horseback for 3 hours, or you can helicopter in about 7 minutes. 10 minutes. You're going to take the helicopter ride for 10 minutes. So we figured we would stop, we would go out and see the Havasupai. We were in Sedona and see how did Bob Marley's vibration get to this ancient tribe at the bottom of the canyon. And that's all that story's in this book. So what we did is we also, I started reading that there was another tribe, the Hopis, which I had heard about. And the Hopis, the Havasupai live at the bottom of the canyon. 6 hours away by car, the Hopis live on a mesa top. So as we're driving east, we figure, well, let's stop and see the Hopi reservation because they have this mystical covenant to become the first Hopi, which means peaceful people. They're not Hopi yet. They are working on a 975-year-old covenant to be the first peaceful people. That's what they were told to do. So we pull in the Hopi reservation, not knowing anything about any connection, and we see a sign in the little grocery store, direct from Jamaica, July 19th, which happens to be Julia's birthday. July 19th at the Hopi Veterans Hall, Mikey Dread. And so we go into the grocery store and we say, wow, is reggae music big here in this remote? I mean, to get to Hopi Land, you leave Interstate 40 in Winslow, Arizona, and you drive for 90 miles, which is about 150 miles or so across the desert, and you pass like 2 ranches. No one can live out there. No one wants to live out there. No one is living out there, but these small 12 villages and of 12,000 Hopis. And they said, yeah, we've had, at the time, 70 conscious Jamaican reggae artists perform over the last 25 years here in Hopi Land. They said there's only 2 things to do in Hopi Land: high school football and reggae music. That's all they have. And this is the Covenant tribe. These are the Covenant people. They're holding the ability to be peaceful for the whole planet. And you're going to meet their elders soon, and you're going to meet a Havasupai elder. So we linked up with Sister Parrot, the Hopi reggae disc jockey, and we ended up doing 5 free concerts out at Hopi Land. And after that, we continued on to Havasupai. And Julia and I, my best friend, in July, in 115-degree record-breaking heat, made almost a deadly mistake to hike down at 8 in the morning. And it was a 6-hour hike with no shade and no water through 115 degrees of the Grand Canyon. And we were very close to heat stroke when we finally hit the Havasu Creek and jumped in that cold water. And they told us to start at 4 in the morning. But we figured, it's only 6 miles. I mean, it's only 11 miles. How hard can it be flat? Once you go down, it's flat, but it's flat through sand in a riverbed. So what we thought would be a 3-hour journey turned into a 6-hour journey. And we met Supai Waters on the 4th day, and he told us about bringing Bob Marley's music down there. Now let me tell you what you're about to see, because it's very, very unique. Until the 1970s, people did not pretty much know there were 800 Native Americans living off the land. They were living in mud wiki huts. In the 1970s, you're going to meet a man who was, until his teen years, lived roots. His whole tribe was living roots. They lived in wiki huts. They fished, they hunted, they gathered. You know, to get to the store, where they had no money, but to get to the store, they'd have to hike out of the canyon. That's 6 hours. They'd have to walk to 66. That would be maybe a 10-hour walk to the highway. And then they'd have to catch a ride to Flagstaff, Arizona, an hour and a half away, and flow up in Flagstaff with whatever they could trade, maybe some antlers or whatever, and get what they could trade, and then make that 1 or 2 day journey back to the canyon. So nobody did it. Nobody did it, and nobody was that interested. And the government would come in every now and then because they want uranium leases or whatever, so they knew, excuse me, they knew what was going on. Is that water? Yeah, and this will do. So they lived roots, and they lived in wickiups. And when Native Americans, when we came here and saw these people living in wickiups and teepees and lodges, and had made no labor-saving devices, and had no lamps and trains and boats and sail ships like England had and Portugal had, we thought, these are savages. At best, they're innocent children of nature. Not. Why would you make a labor-saving device if you worked 4 hours a day loving what you did? Why would you want to hunt with a gun why would you want, you know what I mean? The average Native American person worked 3 to 4 hours a day at totally enjoyable work, weaving, tanning, hunting, fishing, right? Why would you want a bigger teepee with air conditioning and different rooms when you're only in this roots teepee with a fireplace in the middle when you need it to be, and the rest of the time you're out in Jaws world? You see it? They didn't want possessions because they were living in the Garden of Eden. They didn't want labor-saving devices because they were living in the Garden of Eden. They didn't want bigger homes, more power. In fact, they say a good person doesn't want power, and people who want power are usually not good people. They were profound spiritual philosophers who had reached the conclusion that they were one with the planet, one with their creator, which they believed to be one, and one with each other. They were in a pre-fallen state. Now, towards the time the colonists came, they were themselves starting to leave that state, and there were some minor skirmishes and wars, but for thousands of years, Native people in this country, South America, Central America, I don't know about the other Native people before the Babylonian system hit, were living in a Garden of Eden. Can you imagine if we were here 700 years ago and we were all living in this valley here, and everyone everyone had a place with the 12 functions, right? So, you know, Jeanette, who loves to be with children, she was part of the child rearing clan. And, you know, I would be part of the leadership teacher clan. And maybe you would love to do shelter, so you would be part of shelter people, and somebody else would be the hunter-gatherers, and somebody else would be the people that did the clothing. So you found what you loved to do, and you did that, and you were taken care of from cradle to grave. It wasn't a solitary experience like the Babylon system where you and your family are out on your own. If you have money, fine. If you have someone to take care of you, fine. Otherwise, the rest of society will shuffle you off to an old age home or leave you out in the street. You knew that you had this group of a couple of hundred of us living in this valley, and that everyone went through it together. You know, it wasn't like Justin would kill a deer and sell the meat out of his lodge. And he'd have a bigger and bigger and bigger lodge, and the rest of us have to go to Justin's lodge and buy our meat. If someone killed a deer, the whole valley sheared nadir. If you got old, you got wiser and wiser, and people came to you and said, Lloyd, you're in your 50s or 60s. Tell me what I need to know about this situation. You were honored. And by the way, your grandkids are coming over later. They'll be dropping by. They wouldn't even say it. Grandkids just come over. And so the older you got, the more valued you were, the more taken care of you were. If you lost your teeth, they chewed the food and put it in your mouth. Can you imagine the sense of security? Why would you ever leave that system? And if you were a young parent, no problem. The kids somewhere in the village, everyone's going to take care of your kids. Marital troubles, there really weren't too many. A system can bring out the best in us, it can bring out the worst in us. This Babylonian, exploitative, competitive, political, economic system has brought out the worst in humanity across this planet. And this is a competitive system. This was a cooperative, one with the Creator, one with the planet, one with each other, brings out the best in us. All the problems we're having and all the problems that we're seeing our friends and family have and all the obnoxious ways people have gotten in the crazy places they're getting into, it's the system we've been raised under. You take that same person, you put him in this valley 700 years ago, and you see a different person. At peace, loving, kind, considerate, balanced. It's the system that we've lived under that has created the manic, lonely frenzy that is modern life. It's the system. And these were not children of nature, innocent and knew no better. They weren't like, the natural natives. These were profound spiritual thinkers who said, we've lived in the garden for tens of thousands of years. What is there to improve on? We hunt, we fish, we live in wickiups, we take care of each other. There's no improvements to make here. No labor-saving devices. You're about to meet Roland Manakaja. He's in our book. He was raised this way till he was in his teens. And he talks about, and one time one of his other people, one of the others said to Julia, the guy said, what was he, maybe you remember the words better?
What are we talking about?
About the guy that said we shouldn't have changed?
Oh yeah, he it was a cousin, I think, of Supai Waters, and man that we met after we were down in that canyon, and he said we should have listened to the ancient ones, and they had things to teach us, and we should have learned their songs, and we should have learned their ceremonies, but we didn't. And he said it with such a low, peaceful voice that I couldn't help but think the story lives in him. I mean, he was such an amazing voice, and now he has become a little stronger in his communication. And I said to him, even though you didn't learn those ceremonies, they live in you and they'll come alive when you do your sweat lodges and your meditations. You'll feel them and you'll remember them. And I haven't seen him since then, but I'm praying that he has become a leader down in the Supai village there.
Yeah.
He's really powerful.
He says we shouldn't have changed. The elders said don't change. Don't build houses. Don't do that. So you're about to meet Roland, about to take a trip to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. Here's the most amazing thing. What is a human being capable of when they don't interact with the Babylon system and never have? We don't know. Because when the Babylon system came here and they saw people interacting with, they saw the first Native Americans, savages take their land. They're not even using their land. Look, there's gold in their stream. Let it sit there. They're not, it's wilderness. To the Native American, that wasn't wilderness. It wasn't wilderness to the white man's frenzy made it a threatening place. Because, the white man had a sickness that only the yellow metal would cure. That's how they viewed it. They couldn't understand the concept they were born in sin and that the Creator was a vengeful God. The Creator is like giving us this beautiful gift of the earth. We live off of it. He's wonderful. He's our friend. We don't pray to Him one day a week for an hour. We're always in communion with the Creator. We don't even have church services. We just go and be with our Creator in the solitude of our own self. We walked in and think, they got no book, they got no Jesus. Their word for God doesn't sound like God to me. It sounds like, whatever their word was. That's not God, that must be a heathen devil. So we did not, the colonists, not we, the colonists that came and recorded it, they had no way of knowing what they were looking at. When they saw a Native American medicine man do a rain dance, he looked like a savage. The fact that it rained an hour later didn't register. Roland's going to tell you what a human being is capable of when it has lived roots, right? He's going to tell you that these are the 3 different levels you can get to. And it's quite amazing to do that. So let's go to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and then we're going to go up to the mesa with the Hopis. That's Radford Quahumnawa. He's Hopi. He's the eyes, ears, and tongue of the 11 spiritual leaders of the Hopi Nation, the Mother Village. You'll be hearing from him. He's a traditional snake dancer. He dances with a rattlesnake in each hand and one in his mouth. When the Hopi leaders do their ceremonies, they're just ending them, they stay awake for 17 days straight, which is supposed to be physically impossible.
See that image? He's the Sun Clan, and how his face looks just like the Sun Clan image on the podium there.
It doesn't his face in the This is Havasupai. The Havasupai have been culturally and ceremonially devastated. The Hopis have not. Havasupai, bottom of the Grand Canyon, Hopi, top mesa. If you go to any indigenous person anywhere on the planet and ask them what is the most spiritually and ceremonially intact people on this planet, every indigenous person would say the Hopi Indians of Arizona. Look in any book, you know, anything. And we're going to tell you why. This is the waterfall at Havasupai, the bottom of the canyon.
And that's the grandson, Bradford, right? And Dwayne.
Yeah, that was Radford, the Hopi elder's stepson and his grandson.
That's stepson, but son-in-law.
Son-in-law, sorry, son. So this is the Havasupai at the bottom of the canyon. This is us walking down there. Now this was another trip. When we walked down, there wasn't a crowd. Nobody else was as stupid as us. Here's the helicopter landing pad in the middle of the village. Everything's delivered by helicopter, but mostly by horseback. The mail's delivered by horseback. Food's delivered by horseback. And this is Havasu Creek, which has made, famine wasn't a problem, crop failure wasn't a problem, water's not a problem, so they could live roots for centuries. This is their sweat lodge, but that's what their wiki-ups look like. Ah, look at that, man. Ice cold. Thousands of years, tens of thousands of years been there. 2 years ago, a major flood happened, and that 200-foot waterfall is now a cascading series. And it flushed out the entire campground, and they needed it. They said all the outhouses were too heavy, and they just needed to flush out the canyon, and that flushed it out.
Yeah, it was a purification.
It's what?
It was a purification.
Purification. You can go down there and stay in their little lodge, 10 rooms, or stay camping out there.
Where did they go when the flood came?
Well, they know it's coming, and so they get
They live
warning.
on higher ground.
And they run down on horseback, because it's 2 miles to the campground in the village, and they run down on horseback and tell everyone in the middle of the night, get out, go to this location immediately. And people grab everything and run up to this location, and then it floods. Wow. And they were hearing from the people, the weather service in Phoenix, we got heavy rains west of you, and you're going to be flooding in the next 2-3 hours. But they have lost, a lot of people have died in Havasu, but they got caught in flash floods. Or we had one, this was really sad, we had one guy, he was way up on a cliff and he was waving to people in the village, and Julia and I saw him wave back. He was like an Australian tourist who died
His wife, both.
died of heat stroke.
Yeah, they were up there about our age. And they were waving. I thought they were just really, isn't this
Yeah.
wonderful? Found out later that it was really a call for help.
Yeah, they had gotten lost and they, they, died outside the village. So it's, they have, every year someone gets heat stroke or dies in a flash flood. When you're walking down into the village, it says, be careful of flash floods, but you're in a canyon with walls and a riverbed and you're thinking, where am I gonna go? If I hear a flash flood, we were lucky. Okay. You ready to helicopter to the bottom of the Grand Canyon?
Journey to the center of the earth. This helicopter driver was ex-Vietnam.
Love to scare the hell out of you.
Yeah, he does an IMAX on that. It's an IMAX experience.
It's this way for millions of square miles, and as you walk in and fly in, you wonder, how can anybody live here? No one else lives in the other millions of square miles.
How big is the tribe?
800, there's 800 that live down there. Their first language is Havasupai. They're the only indigenous people who everyone speaks the first language in their native tongue. And then they can speak English for the tourists and the government people. But there's 800 in the canyon and about another 400 up in Peach Springs. Most of those people have to be there near the clinic for dialysis, diabetes. Their health is horrible. There's a lot of depression, but the vibes have been increasing the last few years. Better and better. Now they used to have to be shipped away for high school, so they take these youths at 13 and put them in Phoenix or Riverside, California, and they would freak out. They haven't ridden in a car, they hadn't gone to Walmart, and they flee back and never leave again. Most of the tribe is illiterate. There is no written language in their language. When they do accounting for the money the government gives them, they have to bring Hopi accountants in. They're illiterate, unsophisticated people who don't want to leave this canyon, which is beautiful. But bad food came in. Roland said that the white man brought us white sugar, white lard, white rice, white flour, white alcohol.
Yeah.
And it devastated our health. We definitely flew out that trip. We've been back there several times now. But they give us the tribal rate, $25 to fly in and out, where otherwise it's $150. So because of the work with the tribe, they've,
That's why I didn't do it, because it was 25 sounds good.
Even the horseback ride is pretty expensive, isn't it?
$60 for a horseback. And see, now you get to the village.
It's a 3.5-hour horse ride, and you come in kind of, you're happy to be in the camp.
So you're about to meet Roland, who is one of the few people left on the planet that remembers a time when people lived indigenous. There was no money in the village till the 1970s. See, that was the whole trip. We didn't cut this. The average Havasupai has been in more helicopter rides in most Americans will ever be in. Funny, isn't it?
Yeah, really.
Most of them getting picked up for alcohol, which is illegal down there, and getting taken to Phoenix to the jail to get processed.
So we didn't tire of anything. We went in the moon and it was normal for us. It was normal for us. How we used to get the water from the creek.
There was no store down here,
There
right?
was no store.
So how would you just hunt and fish and?
Yeah, we did a lot of fishing. The tribe worked with, I think it was Forest Services, one of the federal entities, and they got the water. The creeks here stocked with fish. So we used to go and fish, catch the fish. We used to have a cat that used to chase us. When the cat saw us picking up our fishing line, you know, we didn't have our fishing rods like the fancy real men type. We just made them on our own. My dad even made a hook using wire, suspended it and molded it like a hook, fish hook, and we put some fishing line on it. We went fishing with it. We caught quite a few fish with that hook, homemade hook.
And then what, so you had, well, I guess people brought in some flour and sugar, the basics down here from Flagstaff?
Yes.
And so someone would go out and bring in all that and everyone would chip in and buy that?
A lot of people save their corn, you know, for different ways to prepare the corn. Deer meat, turkey, and pigeons, and pigs, dried pigs, apricots. So there was a lot of food that was grown that was dry. So even if you didn't hunt, you had relatives that had a large garden or something where they could share what they had.
Now, what was the houses like? You went to frame houses with electricity?
Yeah, before the government housing came in, a lot of the people that began to adopt four walls type construction like modern homes, they started getting whatever they could, like red boxes, cardboard boxes, and patch up homes that way.
Before that, though, was it mostly wickiups like that?
Before that, as I was coming up, there was a lot of that, the wickiups, the earthen destructors, kind of like the sweat lodge, you know, with earth all around it, and fire pits in the center. That was still here.
Now, how much did you guys know about, as children, how much did you know about what was going on the outside? Occasionally, would you go out maybe once a year and see Phoenix and go, oh, that's a whole nother planet?
I didn't see anything about the outside contact. I didn't even know there was white people or black people or Mexicans or any of the other nationalities. We heard about them. We heard that there was the great ocean and that there was people, they call it Hakubia, on the other shore, on the other side. And I heard there was all kinds of different people, and they call them Janma, Kaitahan, and they have their own languages, but we never seen them live until, I would say like 65, 64, as I was getting a little older. I was born in 54. I would say the first contact I had with white people was probably 1958, when I was tied to a boulder sitting by the trail, and people would go by, first hikers that came in, and it wasn't like 100, 200, 300 people a month or anything like that. It was just rare that people came through in a month. Maybe up to 8 people in 1 year in those days.
That was it when
That was
coming.
it. Until Geographic came in, National Geographic came in, Arizona Highways came in, the Postal Service came in, and then it was like the prophecy said that we were hidden from the public eye for a long time. Even Indian tribes that lived in Arizona didn't know there was an Indian tribe living in the Grand Canyon and still living off the land.
And your prophecy said that you were intentionally hidden away.
Yes.
And for what purpose? Did the prophecy say for what purpose?
Because the prophecy said that these resources, the water, the environment would be degraded, devastated, contaminated, polluted for one's gain. Whoever that one person was had a lot of power, had a lot of money. And that isn't the way it's supposed to work. It's supposed to work in a way where the gain goes to everyone, children, elders, with respect to the past, the present, and the future. But that isn't the goals that I see projected by the businesses that are on the plateau today. They use and abuse left and right. They don't care what happens to the cultures that were here and what is sacred to those cultures that were here first. To learn who these people were and to learn to use the tools that they had. I think that's when the houses first came in. But when the houses first came in, the people that brought these proposals of new homes and better houses and luxury and everything did not tell the people back then that they would face solid waste issues, leaks in the homes, how do you repair the plumbing problems, electrical appliances going out. They didn't tell us that we were going to have these problems.
And before you didn't have any problems, you didn't,
Right.
you just had to keep a wiki up going and get enough food to eat.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And those things didn't require too much maintenance, you know. You were living with nature and in nature and living according to the things that you saw, like the wind, the animals behaving certain ways. We must pray. It's universal, and we pray and acknowledge the Creator for everything, whether it brings good or bad. Let us learn from these things and hope that our prayers are being heard by the Creator, God, Jesus, Jah, Allah, whatever name you give, whatever nationality, culture we are, it's still the same being, it's still the same power that gives us the sun, the water, the air that we breathe, that makes us all one. We live close to the environment that we feel so related to these things, that they're a part of us. And that's one thing that's missing with the people going 2 blocks for an apple or an orange or some corn. They never sow the seed and watch it grow through the months and nurture it and begin to develop respect. All they do is run around the block and get whatever they need. And that's the way it's always been for them. The spirits, the shamanism, the medicine man, the singers, the drum keepers, the pipe carriers, the sweatwatch, the fireman, all these different roles that these people had were at, I would say, level 1. And then there's another level that is much higher than the one that has knowledge of the medicine. Oh, this one's for venereal disease, this one's for diarrhea, or this one's for diabetes, or this one's for soreness, or strap throat, or, the knowledge that is here is at a lower level. And that's kind of like the medicine level. And then it goes to a different level where these practitioners have connection with the patterns of the climate, the nature, the wind, how to bring floods or tornadoes. And then there's another level.
So at that level, they actually are running to control the forces of nature.
Forces.
They can split the clouds, they can bring the rain.
Yes. And then it goes to another level where it breaks open another barrier where you can communicate with the spirit world. And that's when you can't attain that level until you master these other levels and that you've proven that you can take care of this knowledge and not abuse that knowledge for one's gain. Shaman power is still here. For me, it's like, just to take that next step, that next level, is gonna commit me more to not make any mistakes when I heal people. Because we are accountable for all our actions. If we abuse that power, then our relatives will start getting sick, or death will come. Even while that power is still here, for me, it's like, just to take that next step, that next level, is gonna commit me more to not make any mistakes when I heal people. Because we are accountable for all our actions. If we abuse that power, then our relatives will start getting sick, or death will come even to myself. And it taught us that time that to be content with what we have. It's not about outdoing each other and having the latest Mercedes-Benz or Cadillac or limo or whatever. Just be content with what we have. We have water, we have love, we have people before you that share this place with you. You hear laughter, you hear music, you hear birds singing, the wind, thunder. It's alive. I appreciate where you're at right now. Like the people related to Marty's music because of the message they have about revelations, prophecies, that's how that fit in. And then the relations that we have with the plants, and the wind, the water, and the love, that we have. Not only the human kind of love, but the love we have for the land, the wind, the birds, the water, the grass, and all the legends and stories we have with all these things. We're so close to them, more than a society that is in the red, yellow, green light, fast lane, and some of those people will read about it, but they may never really understand the true spirit of love for the environment. Because their hearts, their minds have been so poisoned by luxury and material and competition mode that just having a little dirt on their plants like this is taboo. Oh, it's got thorns on it. And for us, it's natural. You come onto the lot, you just lay down on the sand, and this is where I come from. This is where I'm going to go back. It's to the sand. My body will go back, but the spirit that is invisible is going to live forever. That's why that spirit that existed, shamanism, the songs, they're still here. It's just a matter of the right people that these spirits will come manifest themselves again. We may never go back to the bow and arrow and pull it the ways our ancestors lived, but spiritually we can. And that is one goal that I'm hoping that I can be an influence and be an example to the youth.
Nice, huh?
Now, where did he go to learn his English?
He went to Los Angeles area. Most of them go to that Riverside High School here.
Robert, can we read more about these people in the beauty path?
Yeah, and that was like an hour wrap. The whole hour wrap is in there. I mean, this, the Beauty Path book is really takes you deep into this. Here's an interesting fact. There was hundreds, perhaps thousands of settlers who, when they came here and when they saw the way the Native American tribes were living, left the creature comforts of the white world and went to live with the Native Americans. There's not one known instance of a Native American voluntarily leaving their world and going to live in the creature comforts of the Babylon colonist system. What does that tell you about who was happier? women especially, women who were kidnapped by the Indians. If an Indian did a raid and they killed the settlers, they wouldn't kill the women and children, they'd take them back. They didn't rape them, didn't torture them, they made them tribal members. And the women often didn't want to come back. And there was this one quote of this indentured servant who escaped and went to live with Native Americans, and when she was contacted by a government official about would you like to come back, she said, no woman in all the civilized world lives with the freedom and respect that I live with these people.
The matriarchal society where the women really, they really run it and everyone's happy with that. We asked Radford about that, and he says, yeah, once I married Lorna, I'm now in her tribe, and so every year they do this butterfly ceremony, and it takes up their whole August, and they paint these elaborate things, and they dance, and they pray, and they do ceremonies. So everyone watches it like it's a brand new thing, and yet they've been doing these ceremonies for thousands of years, but each year it comes alive in a different way because there's new people putting their passion in it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So what had happened was, from what we're getting from the information that comes through Ken Carey's books, and I want to just encourage everybody to consider getting these books, because this is not coming from a human conscience. Ken Carey himself says that I was trapped in a snowstorm for 7 days, living off the grid in Missouri back in the hippie days, and a presence came into my small little office in the Missouri hills where we lived off the grid for 12 years and gave me this information. And I mean, the level of the information, let's see. You need not leave your physical bodies nor the objects of the physical plane, but you must leave your interpretation of what these objects and bodies are. Your interpretation and definitions only reflect the distortion of your subjective perspective. See what's being said? Interpretations are what stand between you and the clarity of perception that you will need to do the work that lies ahead. We have to change our self-concept, our interpretation of who we are, to do the work that lies ahead. You must release them with your thoughts, with your dreams, with your hopes, with your fears. They may seem to be insignificant, ethereal things, these judgment, these interpretations. Oh, I'm a body to get pleasure. Oh, I'm a person to get money. Oh, I'm a person to get people to love me, whatever. They may seem insignificant, ethereal things floating gently through your mind, but do not be misled by their apparent lack of substance. They are the stuff that wars are made of, the harbingers of death, the agents of disease and destruction. With the energy that you give through them, through your attention, they have such strength to cripple a planet. I mean, that's coming from straight spirit. Our thoughts can cripple a planet, and has crippled a planet. Mm-hmm. Those little ethereal things that go through the day, oh, well, I have enough money. Oh, I'm too fat, I'm too bald. Oh, did I say that right? Does that person like me? All that stuff are the thoughts that cripple the planet, and have done that. So, Maggie?
I was going to ask Julia, would it be all right if I shared my
Yes.
delusion at this point with the whole group?
Well, I don't know, you're the storyteller.
Let me continue on my vein, and then
It's
when we
just
take
on
a
that
break
one.
right before
Yeah,
after the
yeah.
break.
Okay.
Because you know me, when I get on a roll,
Okay.
what can I tell you? And once I leave this program, not many people want to hear what I have to say. Definitely no one in my family.
Yeah.
My extended family, cousins and sisters and all like that. and
I
these
told
other
him one
folks.
time, recently I had a vision of him going to the subway with a soapbox that said "One Love," and just talking in the subway,
Will somebody listen, please?
Yeah, I think people would listen.
Yeah,
Not a lot, but-
last spring we had these young musicians, Eric and, can't remember the young man's name that was only 17. They started just jamming in it like a little open mic time. And they ended up last winter time in the subway both playing music, and lots of people would come and listen to them, and they had such a wonderful vibration. And they just met here. And they ended up in the subway in New York, and they loved it, you know. Roger, or whatever his name was, would visit Eric, who lives up in New York, and, you know, he's making the best of New York by, you know, he plays drums. His last name is Drum, let's see, Eric Drummond, or?
Drum something.
Something Drummond.
Drum, and he's a drummer.
Yeah, he didn't really claim that drum part of himself till he went to Africa. But anyway, you just see how things that look like they're just a mess, they can just, in an instant, can change over. In this tribe that we were just listening, Roland, the Havasupai there's a time when they're ready. The Hopis have a story for them and a ceremony for them to carry forward, but they can't just give it to anyone. They have to make sure that they're prepared and ready for that ceremony. So it's still kind of waiting, kind of resting till the Supai are ready, and it seems like they're starting to get ready to receive that message, you know, and receive the ceremony.
And the Hopis say they have 50 songs and ceremonies that were given to them 100 years ago by the Havasupai leaders who said we're losing our culture. And the Hopis have been keeping it for them, you know, by practicing it every year in the Havasupai language.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because the elders of the Havasupai say we cannot maintain under the onslaught of this new culture. We're going to lose this. And they gave it to the Hopis who have maintained.
Where the
Havasu, and I'll go into that in a little bit. So according to what these books are saying is here's what happened. When Spirit first started to approach planet Earth and seeded the planet with its energy, which caused the first cell organisms in the floor of the ocean, and then, you know, things that come out of the ocean and form, you know, animals and life and plant kingdom, because Spirit was coming to planet Earth, and it got more and more complex. When it got to the point that humanity was created to be conscious of this. In the beginning, humanity could come and go between spirit and matter. That was the Garden of Eden. You could come and go. You always could be in physical form, but you knew you didn't have to stay in physical form. You knew your body, if you let your body go, death wasn't real. You were spirit. And so the first humanity was really connected. That was the Garden of Eden. And then we fell from the garden, not because Adam and Eve killed anybody or got into too much sex or something. They ate an apple. But it wasn't an apple. It was the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They started to judge. And then you fall from grace. The minute you have judgment in your mind, you've lost Zion. You know, I'm not good enough. You're not good enough. You're right, I'm wrong. You're Republican, I'm Democrat. I'm Muslim, I'm Jew. Whatever. As soon as you have a judgment, your thought, you're in a fallen state. You see it? That's why it was the apple. It wasn't an apple. It was the fruit of the tree of good and evil. I don't know how the apple industry ever let it get away with an apple. That's not what the Bible says. So what happened was, and then a system began 5,100 years ago to reflect that separation thinking, the Babylonian system, which began at the same time, 3113 BC, more or less, 5,100 years ago, in Sumeria, in Egypt, and Babylon. And that was a nation-state system, power-based system, exploitation, competitive, separate from God. He'll judge you, you might get up to him. Like I once said, I'm every religion. I'm a Rasta, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Jew. I'm not going to lose heaven on a technicality. You know, I don't want to be at all. So, you know, you a separate God. You got to please him to get to heaven. Separate from each other. Oh, you going after limited resources that I want. Separate from the planet is here to harvest what I want. There's not a gift from the Creator that will give me all that I want. So that began sweeping across the planet. By the time it made its last conquest after 5,100 years, which was in 1492, when it hit the United States mass, this was the last indigenous continent it reached. But even by then, the tribals were starting to come under the wave of thinking which was permeating the whole sphere of the planet by now. So there were starting to be some wars. There were starting to be tribal war skirmishes. They were approaching a fallen state themselves, but still living pretty much in a garden state. Okay? So the Havasupai may be the freshest footprints. I mean, you just met a man who's alive today. You go visit him, who lived roots. He lived that way. And like you said, you could tell by the joy in his voice. We took our cat out, we went fishing, and we swam naked, and we picked the fruit, and, you know, there was no money. Money, I see why Jesus said money is the root of all evil. The love of money. The love of money is the root of all evil. That's the symbolic Babylon system of separation. Money. And this, you know, country is just obsessed with it. And, you know, I forget, I was talking to Robert, and he was telling us how everything in the corporate world is training you to how do you get more money from what you are doing. You know, this is the mentality. So we spent time down there, and we met Supai Waters, who brought the original Bob Marley tape down there, and he told his tribe, we're losing our ways, but this man's music will help keep the vibe going, 1970s. And 40 years ago, and all of a sudden they got little, you know, battery-operated cassette players because they didn't have electricity, and they started listening to Bob Marley. And Bob heard about, and then the whole tribe started listening to him. They started to dread up. And you go down there now, and the cafe's got Bob Marley going, and the little store's got Bob Marley going, and a guy come by on a horseback with dreads, and there are people named after Denroy Morgan, the elder that you saw at Bob Marley's backyard. He said, you know, we don't need partial love, we don't need carnal love, we need divine love. That guy, Denroy Morgan, there's 2 kids named after him. He was thrilled when I told him that. I said, Denroy, do you know there are 2 Havasupai children named after you? He said, no. He said, yeah, named Denroy, not Delroy, Denroy, after you.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so they started to listen to Bob Marley, and they kept their vibe somewhat going. And so we went down there, and we worked with Supai Waters. It's just outlined the book with what we did with him. And let's see, do you have any other thoughts before we go into Hopi about Havasupai?
Well, you know, they have an ancient story about cousins that, there's a legend, I guess I can't really remember the whole thing. Supai Waters, sometimes Supai Waters is like no other human being I've ever met. He clicks into human being, and sometimes he seems like a raven, and then he seems like a Vulcan from another planet kind of a guy. So I have a hard time remembering some of the things that he says. But he talks about how there's these twins that kind of conflicted with being the good and evil themselves, and then they, let's see, what happened with that? Anyway, they're a mystical crew, and they still speak that same language, so their culture is just ingrained in them, even though the youths are choosing cocaine and, you know, the electronics and everything. There's a part that they just can't deny. It's just so strong because of their language and because of their gratitude. There's enough elders around to be appreciative, and the fire keepers, and when they do those sweat lodges, their ceremony is so sacred, where they'll have rocks going to preparing to be put in the lodge, the mud hut, and they call those the brothers. And they have each rock, there's 33 of them, and they'll put them in methodically. And right by that sweat lodge is that creek, so you can do that sweat lodge, which was really intense. You want to just bust out of there, and then they stop singing the ceremonial songs, and it's time to take a break, so you can go in the creek, or just a lot of them just hang right by the mud hut and meditate. But their ancient ways are still there, and I'm looking forward to the day, and I think it's going to be soon, that they claim those ceremonies. And I have a feeling a lot has to do with this Rolex thing that's going to happen here in 10 days or so. They're going to decide I think some of these, like Ross Michael is a powerful drumming Rasta man. He'll probably go from Los Angeles and drive to this Hopi and maybe the Supai and give this message. So it feels like it's potentially stirring, and I'm just kind of watching and waiting and, thinking, as, Siddhartha says, I can think, I can wait, and I can fast, I've been really working on fasting from fear. So,
I can think. Waiting and fasting, I'm still struggling with. So I'm giving it all too much to thinking.
and I think that the youths down there, there's not enough people doing the ceremonies. There was a lot of upset because of the dancers. The dancers are powerful dancers, and they're, do you have a picture of those dancers? They'll, really get into the drumming, and it's a very, very sacred thing they do. So when those dancers feel empowered again, and it seems like that could happen very soon, because once this ball starts rolling with the reggae crew, and I'm thinking Ross Michael, maybe
Bunny Wailer.
Bunny Wailer.
Maybe
So
the Damon Boys. We're going to ask the Damon Boys to join us. The Marley Boys to join us, Damon and Steven.
it seems like it doesn't really matter who's going to be there. Whoever chooses is going to be the powerful ones to really send that message. And if Ross Michael, which I feel like he'll do it, that's enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we talked to Bunny Wailer twice, and we're going to reason with him at Rollix.
Yeah.
And, Bob Marley and the Wailers, he's roots,
But these dancers were effective. They were going to kill off all these elks, and they had this elk headdress, about 3 of them, and they would do their ceremony and the drumming in the sweat lodges, and just really getting into the effectiveness of, this is our vibration, and they're not going to take these elk from us. And they were effective in stopping the killing. Same thing with the Hopi with the water. They, in their ceremonies, kept the water from being contaminated with the coal-fired plant. So it is happening on what seems to be a smaller scale, but it's going to multiply. It's time. The cycle has begun.
We'll have a booth at Rollix, so if you happen to come to it, come by and visit with us. One is, can you imagine living in the bottom of the Grand Canyon your whole life?
Well,
You get up every day. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of depression, alcoholism, diabetes. On the other hand, the people have a childlike mirth in their laughter, and even that you're childlike. You have not spent days in Babylon and Walmart at the office watching TV, though they do have TV now. The satellite came in. Up until satellite, they couldn't get TV. Now they have internet.
of course, and they wouldn't have had the diabetes, of course, with their own natural
if they had-
living. If all the time they were in their natural state, then there would have been no sickness like that.
Exactly, but to them, Babylon is still a spectator sport.
Okay.
To us, it's an active sport. Once we
Yeah.
pull out of that driveway, it's active. To them, it's spectator. So there's still a wonderful childlike innocence to these people. Now, the other thing that we got from that trip, other than that existed, was what Roland said. When a human being lives without commercial influences in a cooperative-based system, at the minimum level, you know the plants. We talked to a woman who went to healers in Africa, and during the week, she was the local healer in the tribe, and people in the tribe would give you a name, and it would be like your cousin, my cousin whatever has diabetes, or my cousin has a blister, whatever, and she would put it in a plastic bag. And the healer would go out once a week into the jungle, and she'd pull out the bag and read it and meditate, and then she'd look out and she would see a plant vibrating. She'd go over and pick that plant and put it in a plastic bag, and that would heal that person. Now, science doesn't understand that, and if science doesn't understand it, it can't be real, because we don't have a name for it. We don't have scientific proof that exists. Because, like he said, you can't be at that level till you get yourself in greater and greater levels of love, so you don't misuse that power.
Are there still a lot of them living there in the valley or in the canyon?
800.
Who don't, but there's 800, but are a lot of those don't go out?
A lot of them don't go out, but that doesn't mean they're living roots. They may be just